Hey everybody, it's Mrs. Henry. I am just here to talk to you about four possible essays you could have on the upcoming test for the cardiovascular system and blood. So there will only be one essay that you have to answer, but they'll be chosen at random. So you could get any of the four. So you need to be sure you're familiar with the four. So first thing I'm going to do is just kind of discuss what the four possible essays are. And then I'll go into depth discussing what sorts of things I'm looking for. So the first essay, it's going to ask you to trace the deoxygenated blood from the body through the heart to the lungs, and then back once it becomes oxygenated through the heart and out to the rest of the body. The second essay, you are going to describe the cardiovascular or cardiac conduction system of the heart. And the reason that the heart can beat is because we have these electrical impulses that go through the heart, but it's going to ask you some questions about that. The third possible essay, you're going to be showing an EKG or an EEG, sorry. They're called either of them. And you're going to be asked why this was taken and what's the overall thing that's happening to the heart. So you're going to have to label the parts of the EKG and explain in detail what's happening. And the fourth possible essay that you could have is you are a healthcare professional and your dad has just come home from a doctor's visit and found out that he had atherosclerosis. And so you have to explain some information to him about what atherosclerosis is. So let's go ahead and start with the blood flow through the heart. So we're going to talk about the deoxygenated blood first. So as you can see, that's in blue. And so depending on what part of the heart it's coming from, if it's coming from the upper part of the heart, it is going to come through the superior vena cava. And if it is coming from the lower part of the heart, it is going to come from the inferior vena cava. And then what it's going to do is it's going to dump into the right atrium. So the right atrium is going to fill up with deoxygenated blood. And then what's going to happen is that that right atrium is going to go into systole, which means that it's going to contract. And when it contracts, it's going to cause pressure on this valve right here. And so then it is going to cause this valve, which is called the tricuspid valve, to go ahead and open. And then when that opens, the blood is going to flow into the right ventricle. Then this tricuspid valve is going to close because we don't want blood flowing back through the heart. And once it's all filled up in the ventricle. Then what's going to happen is this ventricle is going to go into systole, meaning that it is going to squeeze. And when that happens, then it's going to put a lot of pressure on this pulmonary semilunar valve, which is right here. And so that's going to open and blood will flow from the ventricle. And then that semilunar valve is going to close, and these pulmonary arteries are going to take blood away from the heart, because remember, away, artery and away, to the lungs. So at the lungs, we are going to exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide at the capillary level in the alveoli. And so basically, oxygen will diffuse into the blood and carbon dioxide will diffuse out of the blood, and we'll breathe out the carbon dioxide. And then the blood is going to return back to the heart. So it comes back to the heart through the pulmonary veins. And once it does that, it's going to dump into the left atrium. And again, the left atrium is going to go into systole. It's going to squeeze, and it's going to cause this mitral valve here, also sometimes called the bicuspid valve, to open, and blood will flow from the left atrium down into the left ventricle. Once most of the blood has flown into the left ventricle, this mitral valve or bicuspid valve will close, so blood doesn't go back into the right atrium. And then the ventricle is going to go into systole. It will squeeze. And when it does that, then it's going to open up this aortic semilunar valve, which is right here, and cause blood to flow into the aorta. And then once most of the blood is in the aorta, that aortic semilunar valve is going to close so the blood does not go back. And then the aorta will take the oxygenated blood to the rest of the body. That's pretty much all I was looking for with that essay. The second essay that you might encounter is the cardiac conduction through the heart. And so basically the heart can beat because we have these electrical impulses that are sent through the heart. So you have this natural cardiac conduction system through the heart. And you have an elongated mass of specialized tissue just below the epicardium. That's called the SA node. So you can see right here where it says SA node, that bundle right there. Okay, so this part of the heart, the SA node, can reach a threshold on its own. So it can basically stimulate itself if your heart's working and everything's working correctly. So basically, that gets stimulated. And then it's going to cause the atria of the heart to contract. And then what's going to happen is this impulse can travel. And it's going to travel through junctional fibers, they're called, to the AV node, which you can see the AV node, the tract and the AV node. Okay, and then from the AV node, it's going to go to the bundle of branches, which gives rise to elongated fibers called the Purkinje fibers. And that's going to cause the ventricles to contract. So that's kind of what I was looking for there. The next possible essay that you might get is you are shown a diagram like this. It won't tell you that this is an electrocardiogram or an EKG, but you have to know that. And you are asked why this test would be given. So basically what this is looking at is the electrical stimulation in our heart. What is happening? We want to make sure we're not in brachycardia or tachycardia, where our heart is beating too slowly, or too quickly. So this will kind of tell doctors about that. And these aren't going to be labeled for you. So the first part here, this is the P wave. You need to know that. The second part of the wave is the QRS complex or QRS wave, as is listed here. And then the third part is the T wave. So part of this essay is just going to be labeling the parts. And then the next part of it is going to be telling specifically what happens at each of these parts. So here at the P wave, when we're at the P wave, this is the depolarization of the atria. So it causes your atria to go into systole and contract. And even though when we talked about the blood flow of the heart, I started out with the right atrium and kind of went through the right ventricle, and then we talked about the left atrium. The right and left atrium are contracting at the same time, and the right and left ventricles are contracting at the same time. It's just easier when we're talking about the blood flow of the heart to do them separately, but they're contracting actually at the same time. So in the P wave, like I said before, that's where the atrium starts to depolarize. And then when we get to the QRS wave, that is where the ventricles start to depolarize. So they are starting to, and that's going to cause them to contract. And then the T wave, that is where the ventricles start to repolarize. So I think that's really all you need to know for that essay. And then the last possible essay that you could get is atherosclerosis. So basically, you'll see a normal artery here. All the red blood cells are flowing through it, no problem. This artery, you'll notice that we've started to develop some plaque, and that plaque can become really hard over time, and that's called atherosclerosis. And so there are some risk factors for developing atherosclerosis. One that is not in your control is just pure genetics. There is and so if you are somebody that has this in your family, you want to know about your family history. But there are some things, some lifestyle things that you can do too, that can either increase your risk factor for developing this or decrease it. So if you smoke, that can cause that plaque buildup. so you shouldn't smoke. Other things, diet high in fat and a diet high in cholesterol can cause it, and just being inactive and not getting enough exercise can cause atherosclerosis. Um, let's see, two things that could potentially happen if you don't take care of atherosclerosis. You are going to have increased blood pressure because now there's a lot narrower of an area for these red blood cells to get through. So that's going to increase your blood pressure. If your blood pressure becomes high enough, or if this artery or whatever becomes completely blocked, you could have a stroke, or you could have an aneurysm. So the blood pressure becomes so great that basically you bleed out. So those are some risk factors of atherosclerosis. So you try a couple lifestyle changes. You could stop smoking. If you smoke, you can stop. You can change your diet. Try to eat diets high in vegetables, low in saturated fats, cholesterol. You could start to try to exercise more. So those are some things that you could, lifestyle changes that you could do. But sometimes, unfortunately, those aren't enough. And so a couple of medical interventions, if that doesn't work, that they can do, they can go in and they can surgically remove the plaque. So that is one option. Or they can put a stent in here so that no more plaque builds up and those red blood cells are able to get through. So those are the interventions, medical interventions that can occur or that we can do to help somebody with atherosclerosis. And so hopefully that is helpful. If you have any questions, further questions, just ask before the test. Thanks.